everyone, this is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design. Now, we recently produced 2 weeks of our first ever virtual NeoCon on DesignTV. Crazy, right? And it culminated in our very special awards called the HIP Awards, honoring industry people. And today I want to share one of our very special winners. The category was Greater Good in a Small Firm. And it may be small, but it's making a big difference. This is the one and only Kia Weatherspoon of her own firm, Determined by Design. Hey, Kia.
Hello, Cindy.
I can't believe we don't know each other. It seems insane to me. Like, met you for 2 seconds and I'm like, oh my God.
And only virtually. Look at that.
I know, it's crazy. You know, Kia, when we were reading this submission, it was very overwhelming in a way and very powerful. I'm like, not only are you going to win, but I need to get.
Thank you so much. They often say, women say, oh, it's humbling. Thank you. And that, I earned it because I work hard for it to get here and to be focused on the mission. So thank you. I'm excited. It was exciting.
That's the one thing, since, typically, I'm in front of a crowd and I see you, and afterwards we get to chat and hug and all those things, that all of that was eliminated. I only saw you on social, which was also very, very nice. But what was it like kind of not knowing and then like starting to hear your story?
Oh yeah, so this was the thing. At first I was like, oh, I need to know. I need to be prepared, right?
Right.
But there was this anticipation of looking forward to something. And I think we're missing that right now. And I was in the kitchen, like eating lunch, and then I'm watching, and I'm trying to like capture it on Instagram simultaneously. I'm like, well, what if you don't win? But it was just this moment of just like, keep doing the work. Industry is seeing it. And it just felt like, okay. It was so good. It was good. I love the build up. It was really good.
There was a build-up, especially since, you're not in the audience and without people around you that are supporting you. It's like you're in your kitchen. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's like, okay. But I think the anticipation was still the same for me. It was a little bit more intimate and personal, I feel like. And that part, I might have had a little tear.
I love that, a little tear.
A little tear. I'm like, okay, keep doing it.
Well, can I just tell you, while you're tearing, I'm over here like all by myself, well, with my amazing husband, but like, like dun da 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 da,
Yeah.
I don't get the feedback back, you know what I mean? So I'm really glad we have this time together. And I do want to share your story with everybody because it's pretty amazing, and it lets you know the power of like a human will. So I tell everybody that you're in the Air Force, or were you in the Air Force to try to get an education?
Pretty much, yes. I initially joined the active duty Air Force in 2001 to get money for school. No one in my family had been in the military before, and I don't know where I got this light bulb moment. It was like, you want to pay for school, join the military. And that's what I did. I joined the Air Force, active duty Air Force, in 2001 with this notion of I wanted to go to college, but at this point it wasn't design. I still was really focused on dance.
Right. I know. I read this piece, which you have to tell us the story about the tents and the privacy and how that makes you think about space.
So this is what happened. I'm 19, I joined the military, and in my naive mind, I was gonna get stationed on the East Coast where I was from, and I was gonna serve my country during the day, and I was gonna dance at night. I got stationed, right? Cute, right? At 19, you think you have it figured out. Cute. I got stationed in Wichita, Kansas at McConnell Air Force Base in July of 2001. And then shortly after that, September 11th happened. And I was on the first of 5 deployments to the Middle East. And 19, I've never been out of the country. I've never been away from my family. Different time, different time zone. And I remember so vividly getting off the plane. It was a C5, and I wanted to call my mother and I wanted to cry. And in the shuffling of us to our lodging and getting supplies, I just was like, oh my God, I need to cry. And everyone's unpacking, and I'm in this tent. It's about 14 feet long, and there are women, cots and women lined up on each side. And something said, create a space. You need some privacy. And I took some sheets and I hung it from the top of the tent with some string. And it was the first space I ever created. And I bawled.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember just crying like a baby. And I needed it. I needed that moment of just comfort and solace. And those 3 sheet walls, that's what it did for me. And I would deploy 4 more times, various locations, and never knowing what our building would be like. And it was always this exercise: how can I create a space or design something that makes me feel whole and healed in these extreme environments?
Wow. Wow. And you know, it's so true that as you were so young, now you already had a creative spirit because it was about dance, right? So that kind of makes sense to me. But also that as a young girl, you also had access to seeing that creativity as dance as opposed to design, right? So yeah. And that's, you know, we say that education is part of the big issue right now.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think for me, it was also, I didn't even know what interior design was a thing. I knew, what I learned was, okay, your space can impact your emotions and your feelings. And when I got out of the military, I was like, what is that? Let me Google something. I don't think Google was around back then. I'm dating myself. But it led me to interior design in a very kind of roundabout way that I don't think I would have ever had access to, thinking about like the home and the community that I grew up in. Design or a well-designed space wasn't a thing. Our house was just our house. But this extreme experience made me realize, like, no, space is about impacting, healing, comfort, so much more.
Right, right. So what a, you know, a blessing in a very strange, convoluted way.
Isn't that how most blessings come, though?
I think so. I think we make plans and then there are other plans for us, right? So
yeah.
So then tell us, like, how long did you serve and what did that look like before you? Because then you went to design school, right?
Yes. So I served on active duty for 5 years. I'm still actually serving right now. I'm just in the DC Air National Guard. So I have 18 years of total military service. Which is, it sounds intense, but it's probably one of the best things I've ever done. And in between, like, transitioning from the active duty Air Force to my career, I decided to go, I got a job first at a hotel management company as their receptionist. And then just in me knowing I was going to design school, I finagled a position for myself and became their design coordinator, working on all their capital renovation projects. And it was a perfect industry entry into hospitality design, budget, finance, the numbers.
How old were you then? How old were you then?
Oh, I was 25.
Ah.
At a whopping 25, I was able to create a position for myself, more than double my salary. All because I knew my work ethic was a beast. And I think I led with that.
Where does that come from?
Cindy, I'm serious. I think certain things are just gifted to you. And I think the universe, God just gifted me that. And I think also, you know what, I'm gonna take that. I think it's both. I think it's both in. And this might go a little heady, but stay with me.
That's okay. We love that.
I am, you know, the simplest, oversimplified version. My mom was a 2-job working mother. My dad was an electrician, alcoholic, and had out of rehab. And I had a brother who was incarcerated for 15 years. And that piece alone consumed a lot of attention. So as a kid, unless I did something in my like adolescence, teen, unless I did something deemed successful, I wasn't seen.
Right.
And the minute I started doing things successful, it was like I was seen. So I think it kind of giftedness, but also this desire to be seen. And it's like, okay, work hard and people will see you. Work hard, work hard. So I think it's kind of both and giftedness and just, you know, circumstances of life that are just familial dynamics that just happen no matter where you come from.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, I had a completely different background, but to me that also, I can understand that. And I always believed it was work. So just work harder than everybody else. Like just do it, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, all right, so let's fast forward and let's get to your firm, aptly named Determined by Design.
Yes.
How hard was that?
To start it wasn't hard. That part, it was easy. Again, burnout culture plagues our industry. And very early, after I got my degree and got this job, I was getting burnt out really quickly. And I was like, okay, is this the way? I hope not. And then I remember thinking like I could find another job, but I felt like it was always going to be something. And then I started looking for leaders in the industry to ask for advice, and I couldn't find any. I couldn't find any who looked like me. And I said, well, let me stop building someone else's dream and build my own. And it was the most clear, concise decision I ever made. And I never had thoughts about being an entrepreneur, but it was like, okay, build a practice that you don't see. And that was that.
Right. And it's such an unbelievable message to so many young people. First of all, the meaning of the firm and your success, but also, you know, that you're a woman of color and that's doing it. You are so unbelievable.
and so that was the thing. I was like, well, maybe I'll go work for a Black firm. And it didn't exist. I couldn't find firms led by women of color. Frankly, I didn't really know any other designers of color. And I was just starved for community and connection.
Yeah,
and I think it was one of those things, like I didn't have 6 months of my salary saved up. It was just, this is your path, go. That was the easiest part. It was everything outside of that was hard. Go figure, right? But yeah.
So
I love. Go ahead.
No. So tell me about because I know you're doing a lot of affordable housing. You're doing other things too, but you are also what you're doing has meaning too.
Yes. So, and this, it wasn't necessarily about a market segment. It was, I started a business and I did a free project, and everyone was like, you don't start a business and do free work. But it was.
But you're not Kia Weathers. You're not Kia.
Yeah, right. And it was a project for domestic violence survivors. And we approached this project like always all excited. I'm like, I'm going to bring interior design to these 12 women and 32 children. And in that process, the women were like, first of all, calm down. Second of all, we don't need this. Third, they couldn't tell me what they needed. They could tell me what the other women needed. And through this process, it was very important for me to make sure they felt like they were empowered to create their space. And it went from, we don't need this, to, oh my God, someone would do this for us. I thought I could only see this on TV. Is this something I could do one day? And when the space finished, the big thing about design, it's about the big reveal and the pretty picture, but we're revealing the space to the women. And this woman said to me, Miss Kia, when I walked into this room, I realized change was possible for me. And that feeling to this day reminds me that the people who need access to well-designed spaces the most, they don't know they don't have it, they don't know they need it, and they don't have an advocate. So I built my business around being that advocate. And it just so happened to be our focus where it was the most blatant was affordable housing. And I think that's where we've spent a great deal of our practice and time in affordable housing, but it translates not just in housing, but to, you know, the small brick and mortar retailer in the gentrifying neighborhood that's been there for 20 plus years? How do we create an environment for them to be a lasting part of the fabric of the community? I think it's all those things. Does that make sense?
No, totally makes sense. It's all about the human experience, and I love that because there's like a little. Were you talking about like there's a little lingerie store?
Yes. Oh my, yes. Even Cherry Blossom Intimates. This is why I love that project. It's two women of color. One of them is the most renowned breast cancer surgeon in the DMV area, and they wanted to create an elevated experience for breast cancer survivors when they were getting fitted for their prosthetics. Wow. And luckily, my family has never been touched by cancer anyway, and they're explaining this such a sterile and undignified experience to go be fitted for a prosthetic. And I was like, wait a second, are you serious? And then it gets down to prostheses being available to match their skin tone. And I think for me, it was all about, you know, developing a strong concept that was about uplifting the experience for these women and allowing these small business owners to create something that healed and inspired and brought beauty to people's lives. And it just so happened to be retail. So it's not about the market segment. It's about who's not receiving an elevated design outcome and how do we change that immediately?
Right. I love that. I love that because it's so funny. I saw some of the images without knowing that story, which has so much more meaning. I saw a beautiful project, the Archer Park Apartments. Is that one of your recent ones? It's so beautiful.
Thank you. Oh, I say I love that. I really love all my projects, but I love that project because it's in a low-income community in Ward 8 in Southeast DC, and it's named after the second Black registered architect in the district. And I thought that was just a beautiful narrative. So for me, that project was important because this particular developer, they do market rate and affordable housing, and they've never used a separate interior design consultant on their affordable housing projects. For us, it was like this opportunity to say, one, do better, two, do better, and three, your space is supposed to inspire the next generation of design professionals. So we took Mr. Archer's work, we worked with a local photographer, and we photographed it all. We used characteristics and architectural elements to inform our design decisions. And we put up these little placards that let the Black and brown girls, boys and girls in that building know, you live in a building named after a man who built communities. He designed communities. That narrative alone is about inspiring them to think, can I do that? Which is why I love that project.
That's amazing. Yeah, inspiring and empowering and giving him that backstory. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. I remember years ago you posted something like practice safe design, use a concept, right?
Yeah.
I remember that. I'm like, I love that. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I remember touring an affordable housing project in Long Island City, and there was a pool in the project. It was a glorious project, and a woman had just had a baby, and she was like sitting at the poolside, and she said, never ever in my wildest dream dreams could I ever think that I would be able to afford living in a place like this. And her with the baby, it was just so incredibly touching. So I can't imagine what it's like for you to be such, you're just an amazing advocate, but you're just giving people so much more of things that, like you said, that they didn't know that they even could have or deserved, frankly.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's we do installs and residents are like, is this stuff staying? Is this for us? Or, the leasing staff will say people will walk into the space thinking this is, just a regular luxury or market rate building. And they're like, wait, we can't live here because this is affordable housing. But I think it is. There should be no distinction between the two. Just create spaces that reinforce someone's value. That's what we do every day. That's the mission.
Absolutely. Tell me about what's the momentum at Shady Grove? What's that one?
Oh, so that's the one where literally the property management was like, we get a lot of people who think that this is a market rate building. And I love that project because how we come to a lot of projects is we come in later to the game and, budgets are already set and we have to create these design concepts and this story that really impacts the community. And that project's finished last year. And we were able to kind of implement this good, better, best approach where during our design, there's this beautiful layered wood wall in the lobby. We detailed it 3 different ways. So no matter what the price point, the design outcome remained the same. And that's when our clients are like, okay, they're making it achievable. The budget does not dictate the design. It's our problem solving skills that help us achieve great design outcomes. But that is another one of my favorites.
That's fantastic. I only saw one picture, so you got to send us more, which is fantastic.
Yes.
And then, look, what a voice that you have. And I'm so glad that you speak to others, that you mentor others, that you give your time. There's another organization that you feel really passionately about, the Room to Rebloom. Right.
Yes. And so Room to Rebloom was that first project I did with the domestic violence survivors. And it just married itself. It was very kind of this philanthropic effort right off the bat. It's like, okay, we wanted to provide these design services, but I also needed to stay engaged as a board member. So that one has been really near and dear to my heart. And looking at it from fundraising, policy, and working with a lot of other domestic violence agencies here in the DC area. But that project, that organization and entity was at the foundation of my practice.
It's kind of crazy when I think that, I'm sorry, I have to say, I think that you're from DC where we think it's so conservative. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. It's like, there you are, this firecracker. I could just see you you're just parting the waters.
That's what I think it is that, Cindy. I think I honed in on a couple of things immediately that I played to my advantage. One, there was no one who looked like me doing what I was doing, period. There was no one going after a market segment that didn't even use design or saw design as a necessity. And my voice was fresh, right? So those could all be seen as hurdles, but for me, it was like play into it, play into the strength, play into the adversity, and do the work and make it about others.
Were you seem fearless, but were you ever afraid?
No, because this is what I think, situational awareness trumps fear. I think I wasn't afraid because I think I knew, when I was building my business and trying to pursue clients, it wasn't going to be in my best interest to go look and work with the white developers, that my same white counterparts was working with. So I said, who's going to have greater buy-in? And I strategically started partnering with small to mid-sized Black developers. And that alone, going to my community, that was the smartest thing I'd ever did. But it was situational awareness is key. And I think because of that, I wasn't afraid. And that resulted in getting great projects and growing with my clients. And then everyone else was like, well, they're using her. We want to use her. But that alone really was the launch pad. And the fact that I'm saying something, right? I'm saying there's an inequity happening. Let's change it. And I think I'm unafraid to say that. I'm more afraid people will continue to live in bad buildings that diminish their value and diminish communities. I'm more afraid of that. So everything else doesn't matter.
That's so beautiful. I mean, the other thing that touched me is something you wrote that said that you never had a mentor. And so very, very sensitive now to let young people know that it's okay and you can do this, and how powerful design is.
And I think one day I'm gonna let that I've never had a formal mentor go, but I'm not there yet. I'm working on that with my therapist.
Okay.
But for me, I am trying to be the example I never had. And I do a lot of speaking, and I went to Virginia Commonwealth University earlier this year in 2020, and I'm doing a presentation to some students, and this girl raised her hand, Black girl, and she says, "You're the first designer of color I've ever seen." And I was thinking about quitting my program because I didn't want to go to a career field where I was going to be the only one. So I felt that for her, and I think I show up, I do the work, and I win all the awards, not for me, but so no person feels like this career, this creative career, entrepreneurship, it isn't an option for them because of their skin. That's why I do it every day, all day. It's for others and the greater good.
Yeah, the greater good. By the way, you're a really good designer.
Right?
I can say that you're a really good designer. I'm looking at these projects, and they're beautiful projects. Because at the end of the day, for me, also it has to always be about design first. And so, yes, an incredible message, but you're also elevating the profession, which in many different ways.
Yes, I think, and that's the thing. I knew I had to be an equally great designer as I was the business owner. And I love concept development, schematic. I still love that trace and Sharpie moment at its purest form. And that feeling of walking into a space that you finish, it never goes away. That that was in my head and now it's in real life. You know what I mean? And you just see it and it sings. I think design is truly empathy in practice. And those outcomes are about beauty, texture, lighting, materials, furniture, fabrics. And I think I love those moments of bringing a space to life and bringing people joy. Oh, it's such a good thing to do.
Wait, Kia, are you, I heard that you couldn't pick up one of your awards once because you were deployed again. So are you still in this business?
So at the height of everything that happened with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, as a member of the DC Guard, I did get activated. And it was 19 days, starting at May 31st of this year, of just being activated in the thick of the protest, completely unexpected. I learned a lot about myself. But I was activated during all this kind of racial unrest, and it was a life-changing experience. And mind you, I've been to war, right? But this was just a different type of experience.
What did you said you learned something about you said you learned something about yourself?
I think I learned even more just about my resiliency, and I think sometimes, there's one thing to wear the uniform. It's another thing to be Black and wear the uniform. And those two dynamics and how sometimes you have to show up for the greater good first. And then you have to ask for help. I remember at the thick of it, it kind of disrupted my business a little bit. And my wingman, the Air Force instills in you this wingman concept. And she's like, Kia, I know it's hard, but you need to ask for help. And it helped me to overcome that pride of not reaching out when needed. But it was quite the interesting experience. I won't forget it ever.
Well, first of all, you know, we have to make a big deal about a lot of things. First of all, your military service. Unbelievable. Thank you for being a patriot. Also for being a builder who's building communities. And you're, you know, you really are a pioneer. You shouldn't be a pioneer, right? But you, I mean, like there should be others, but people are going to listen. And you know, for being a pioneer, for being a positive force, Kia, you are like a ball of positivity. And by the way, also strength, which you know really, really matters. And that voice that we all desperately need. And an amazing designer. My God, how many do you possibly have, Kia?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just, you know, it's talent, and I think it's this desire to serve others. And it sounds, it's truly at my core. It's how can I serve others, and how can I be the voice that for someone who doesn't have the giftedness to speak up, right? And I think that's at the core of what everything that I do. And I love it. I love it.
I feel that, you know, I feel that connection with you also, Kia, because I always accepted this role as one of service. So every time I hear that from you, I feel that sort of, you know, that sisterhood in a way.
Yeah.
But listen, what you know, we couldn't have given a more deserving person for talk about an honor that's right up your alley, the greater good, right? And
yes,
we are going to get that hug in sometime for sure, Kia.
Yes.
And I want to follow what you're doing, and I want you to share some of your projects with us, because you know there's a lot more there, and an amazing message for the community. And Kia's sending all this love out, and so am I. But a big virtual hug, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm like, you know, brimming with like happiness and joy right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was my spirit needed this. I'm so grateful. So grateful. Thank you.
Well, we're grateful for you. So.
Wow, thank you.
I'm going through just to give you to touch you. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you. Okay, Kia Weatherspoon, everybody. Congratulations. Our HIP Award winner for Greater Good Small Firm, determined by design. You're going to be hearing more about this one. Thank you.
So in the heart of Seattle's Georgetown neighborhood, you can find a company who's defined by an ever-evolving tale of innovation and creative exploration, and with a mission to craft endlessly variable custom lighting creations using unique materials assembled by hand with locally sourced parts. Driven by a spirit of cutting-edge design and a passion for excellence, Light Art is looking to change the way you see light. With me today is Ryan Smith, founder of Light Art. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you for being here. Calling in from Seattle, of course, correct?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Can you really tell us about the impetus to launch the company? You're a trained architect, are you not?
Yeah, my background's architecture. The lighting for us started in 2003 as really a separate company. And then, we eventually connected and merged with Freeform. And so we've been doing lighting here almost 20 years. And yeah, it's a bit, odd to, kind of have such a career shift, but I always find coming into something that you didn't study is kind of interesting. You're a bit of an outsider, and maybe that's helped us look at things differently.
And then have you encountered challenges to your mission, maybe even especially right now in this period of time, to your mission of making high quality light fixtures with unique materials and all assembled by hand and really locally sourced in Seattle?
You know, yeah, the challenges are, well, for one, there's a lot of challenges just making things in the US. And so we've had to figure out, you know, where do we source things? How do we, you know, make them make sense economically? So there's a lot of those pieces, but I feel like through kind of making something special or just maybe putting enough time to design it the right way, you know, we can kind of overcome some of those things. And also doing things maybe that are a little bit different or you know, kind of special do stand out. I mean, people want that specialness too, and I think it starts to differentiate maybe a little bit of what we do.
So we're here today to specifically talk about your new collection, Coil, which just won a HIP award, so congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Can you explain how this product was a real breakthrough for light art in terms of production?
Yeah, well, you know, we've been working in this resin platform, you know, from day one, and we have been thinking over the last few years, how do we make some of our product out of scrap or, you know, reuse some of what we're doing? It's a, you know, a current way of thinking. And so we said, well, let's try to just go back to our garbage literally and scrap fall off and, you know, reconstitute it, remake it. And so there was this long process, which I can show you wonderful examples of how to take that, you know, grind it up and essentially extrude it into a new product. And, you know, at first it was like, oh, this is this really simple idea. And it was not a simple process by any means. It took us almost a couple of years to sort of figure out that formula. But I think it's really fun to think about how can you take something and turn it into something that is maybe better than the original source. You know, maybe the original source was something flat and it, whatever it might be, but the new thing is now this sort of special.
How many prototypes did it take to really get to those ultimate 7 patterns? Because I mean, I can see sort of a little bit behind you, you got, you know, starts and stops that really make up the Coil collection. Yeah,
these are actually some of my favorites, some of these pieces. You know, you think you've got a good idea going, you know, and then that happens. We probably did easily a couple hundred shapes. You know, I think over the course of just working on, you know, we started with a simple size where we would play with the color and the texture was wrong, or that we would get flaws, the temperature was wrong, the speed was wrong, the material was wrong. We went back to our supplier or reformulator. We had to do that 3 different times to get the matte finish right. And so just going through this process to get, you know, kind of the color fixed and the matte finish fixed and the inconsistencies fixed and the little globs of things that get stuck in the resin fixed. It was an amazing amount of time because it's so easy to make something out of a new material. I mean, it works, but when it's already been used and it's got imperfections in it, you have to sort of figure out how to navigate all that. And that's probably the really, I think, interesting part of all this is how do you overcome all of that? Because it's the harder route, but once you figure it out, it becomes a really interesting opportunity. So we're pretty excited by that.
Can you say this was a real collaborative effort between Light Art and your parent company, Freeform, and other polymer companies in order to really figure out how to make what is now Coil?
Yeah, the challenge, you know, again, you always sort of think you've got this really easy solution, and all of a sudden you run into all these roadblocks. And so we, utilizing what Freeform's been able to assist us with, and the connection to all these companies across the U.S. That we source from. They're some of the largest suppliers in the U.S. We had these great conversations with these companies where they, you know, would ask the question like, well, "What are you doing? You know, why are you doing that?" And we say, "Well, we're actually kind of trying to do this, and we think it's going to be interesting." And we started having this conversation around something you wouldn't think, you know, people might be interested in, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to help. Yeah, let's try to figure that out." And so we would go to these different companies and, you know, do tests in their own R&D labs as well as ours here. And so it's been this kind of connection between what we do here, what we do in Freeform, and what we're doing in, you know, 2 or 3 other locations to try to figure out how to make something look interesting. I mean, that ultimately, like when you kind of take garbage, so to speak, it never really looks as good as what you would hope it would be, right? You kind of, it always looks sort of recycled. How do you make it look not recycled? How do you make it look, kind of cool? So that was our goal working with all of these people.
And I mean, for the Coil collection, this really is part of your mission and that of Freeform, the Align mission, correct? To really be a company that is net positive in terms of climate, waste, and energy.
It is, yeah. So I mean, it's yeah. We've been thinking about sustainability for a very long time. Freeform has had some early efforts in that going back, 10 to 15 years, and I think it's been sort of built into a lot of things that we've been doing, is getting red list free products, using clean ingredients, and we started to say, well, how do we put this together in a way that we can tell people more about what we do, and we're proud about it. It's hard to do, and so we said let's package it together under something we called Align, and it's really just our sort of internal messaging around all of these different steps that we're taking, but it allows us to sort of say I think a lot of important things, and it's a message that a lot of people are wanting to know more about, and how do you solve the problem of things that don't have a use, after they're done. And I think, single use and durability, and there's all these kind of new terms coming into the design world, as well as, how sustainable is it? How clean are the ingredients? It's not just what it looks like, and so you've got all these new parameters that you have to start thinking about, and they're kind of fun challenges, really. And so we embraced all of that, and I think it's pretty exciting to have a product that connects to that Align initiative.
So of course, looping back to Coil, with no pun intended, so can you go a little bit more into the waste or the garbage that you're saying that actually makes up the fixture?
Well, yeah, I know it's a bit of I suppose a strong word when you think about that, but as any manufacturing process, you always have, kind of the offcuts or the edges or the pieces that don't work. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's take this starting point. And actually, I'm going to show you an example of this. I have some right here. We just chipped it up. And so you can see in this, jar, there's just chips of our material, different colors. And, it's like, okay, now what can we do? We can reconstitute this. We then took it to a step further. This has been sorted. So it's the same chips, and they're just sorted where the color is pulled out and the clear is pulled out. And Freeform has invested in this machine that allows you to separate these colors. So this is our starting point to say, how can we get this material back to a point where we can do something with it? And then at that point, we started to add color and add these other elements to it to create kind of the look and feel that we're after.
And then, so you touched on color, because actually with this collection, it has a very monochromatic color palette, which is black or white. And was there a meaning behind that?
Yeah, there is. And I'm going to show another example of that. So and this is back to the naivete of thinking, oh, let's grab this material and it'll just, come out great. Well, what happens is, and even some of that clear material that I just showed you, here's an example of that material, and it gets remade into these small pellets, basically. But what actually might look clear turns out to be sort of a little bit of an off-white or kind of a gray. And so, we ended up doing, and actually I'll show you this. This is sort of a fun example. I'm gonna make this very interactive because maybe that's interesting. This was our first piece that we printed. We took some of these chips and we put them in our machine. We said, okay, let's see what happens. And here this thing came out. It was just a mess. And the colors, were not blending at all. Surprise and maybe a bit of a setback, but we said, okay, let's like simplify this process. Let's just see if we can get to white and black, but let's do white and black in a really beautiful way. So it's just kind of a matte white and a matte black, and they have this very subtle hue to them. They have almost a kind of pottery-like feel. So that was our goal with color. And I think we can add a lot of colors down the road, but the simple point is just if we can achieve those two sides, because we have sort of technically a dirty mix and a kind of a clean mix, we can kind of sort our mixes into those two colors.
And then you just touched on it because there is something beautiful, which maybe people at home on their computers can't necessarily capture, but there is this matte, very pottery-like finish that you were able to capture. I mean, was that a huge challenge to be able to really create?
Well, it was, and I can, let's see, I hope these displays are interesting. So here's sort of the example of the two colors in its final form before we turned it into our shapes. But what's interesting is before we started to play with kind of that finish, here's a better printed example. It's quite often what you'd expect. It's a bit shiny and maybe not that interesting. And to me, this felt a little bit, I don't know, not as good. You know, it didn't have that kind of subtle quality. And so, you know, it was sort of easy to get a shape in this sort of shiny thing, but it was much harder to get something that had this kind of higher quality. And really, you know, this is maybe going to show up a little bit better, I think. This is the kind of matte finish. And, you know, the more matte finish it goes, I think it looks a little bit less like resin. And it does evoke another, you know, kind of quality. So the idea that it looks like pottery and it has this sort of softness to it. It almost looks fragile. A lot of people ask, you know, is that breakable? And I say, no, you can hit it on the table, you can drop it. And so that, I love the idea that products have this kind of second or third meaning, or you think it might be something that it isn't. That's kind of exciting to me when you see that happen.
Well, it's great because it's also, it doesn't just feel like another piece that was produced and everyone's like, oh, I know that was like 3D printed or additive, you know, manufacturing process. Like it actually feels different, which is great. And then ultimately you ended up on 7, lucky number 7 actual shapes, correct?
Yes. Yeah. We had like 15 or 20 shapes. We said, we started with this idea that, okay, the shapes are maybe reminiscent of vessels. And so we had all these kind of fun ideas. And then we said, no, let's just boil them down to just shapes that we kind of like, that sort of feel right. And so it was really then telling the story of the material, and the shapes just happen to be kind of these beautiful, you know, secondary, you know, kind of reasons for these pieces to be. But the vessel and the pottery reference, I think, started to come in, you know, very strong for how these play out. And they all have also a sort of a subtle, you know, the shape not only being simple, but having there's a sort of a subtle texture to them that was very kind of interesting for us to get to. And you know, you can make something look very sort of machine made, but we actually had, we wrote our custom G code to wiggle, basically. And so it actually causes the thing to look a little bit rough and even more handmade. So it's funny, the more further away you can get from machines and kind of technology, the more handmade and soft and sort of you know, historic, if that's the right word. You know, I think it adds a really interesting, you know, kind of way of thinking about these.
Well, also I was going to say it's a little bit of a departure maybe from some of the other products that you create, because it also, you know, besides the shape and obviously this very pottery-like finish, it really does capture this residential aesthetic that you may not always see with light art.
Well, that was something true. I mean, we're doing a lot of these flat sheets as our kind of starting point. And so a lot of our bigger projects tend to have bigger shapes because we're sort of manipulating these kind of large sheets. And what was fun about this project was we had this machine that can actually create these kind of very elegant, you know, circular shapes. And I thought, oh, this is the first time we can actually make kind of round things. And so we started to really think about that. And at the same time, yeah, it's a scale that is very residential. And I think a lot of commercial projects are going much more residential, as we know, the resimercial feel. But also, gosh, even over the last few months here, I mean, everyone's thinking about their kind of home space now and their home office or whatever it might be. And, you know, what's that feel that you want? And you know, having something kind of small and beautiful is always a wonderful way to add to a space.
Well, kind of touching off from that, I mean, beyond the coil collection, are you using this specific time period and really our time working from home, looking ahead to your next collection?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we've been thinking about it a lot, and I know there's a lot of people been you know, talking about ideas, and it's definitely going to shift. I think how people, obviously, a lot of shifting going on, but just that, are people going to want maybe warmer spaces, or is there a comforting factor? Is it, not so much, kind of large, big things. Maybe it's smaller, more intimate things. So there's a lot of that I think is kind of out there, and we're all collectively in the design community just saying, like, what is this, or how do we pull these things in? What does that mean? And I think also, and this was, we started this project 2 years ago, but the materiality and sort of the story, the sustainability story behind this becomes another sort of important piece of like why it makes sense. It's like, yeah, we actually have a real reason for doing this. It might look interesting. It might, fit, in your space, but it also has this sort of reason to be, and this sort of, sustainable story, which I think is a real future trend, and it, as these things, go based on the bigger economies of scale and whatnot. But it's people are all thinking about this, and they want to think about that, and it's just a good solution. It's a really positive way to think about how we can envision products in the future.
Well, Ryan, I mean, we all definitely look forward to seeing what does lay ahead for LiDAR. And I want to say thank you so much for really your insight into the brand, into the Koyo collection, and sort of your design process. And to our audience out there, please make sure to check out the LiDAR website to learn more about Koyo and what's to come for the brand. Thank you.
Thank you, Helene.